They say success is the best revenge. I used to believe that. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, climbed the ladder rung by rung while others cut corners or coasted on handouts, I'd finally be free, free of the judgment, the guilt-tripping, the endless comparisons. But what no one tells you is that when you come from a family that needs you to stay small so they can feel big, success doesn't set you free. It paints a target on your back. My name's Nathan. I'm 27 years old, a software engineer working for one of the biggest names in tech. The kind of place that makes your LinkedIn blow up just for adding the company logo. I live in a sleek downtown penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline view, and a coffee machine that costs more than the car I drove in college. On paper, I've made it. But behind the scenes, there's a whole different story brewing, the kind you wouldn't believe unless you lived through it. And unfortunately, I did. I didn't grow up in luxury. I wasn't handed anything. My parents weren't cruel, exactly, just conditional. Everything was a transaction. Love, attention, pride. You had to earn it. And even then, it came with strings. My younger brother, Brandon, never had to worry about that. He was the golden child. He could bomb out of classes, get arrested for petty vandalism twice, and still be met with, "He's just figuring himself out." Me? One missed homework assignment in 8th grade, and I got the silent treatment for a week. When I told my parents I wanted to go to college out of state, they laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-on belly laugh, like I'd just said I wanted to be an astronaut at 18. "You think we're going to take out loans for that? Be serious, Nathan." So I got serious. I worked 2 part-time jobs through high school, saved every dollar. In college, I averaged 70 to 80 hours a week between classes, tutoring, food delivery, and night shifts at a security desk where I coded on a beat-up laptop while watching grainy CCTV footage. I lived off caffeine pills and dollar menu burgers. I didn't party. I didn't date. I barely slept. But I graduated at the top of my class, built a few side projects that went semi-viral on GitHub, and landed an internship at a firm that eventually led to my current role. I never took a penny from my parents, and I never once held it against them, or at least I told myself I didn't. Brandon, meanwhile, bounced around majors for 6 years and dropped out twice. He never worked a real job, just odd gigs my dad lined up through his buddies. My parents kept telling him to find his passion, like that was a valid excuse for coasting into his mid-20s. When he finally settled on a photography business, they basically funded it. New camera, studio space, even covered his rent for a year to help him get on his feet. I remember coming home for Thanksgiving once during that time and seeing Brandon's new apartment. It had exposed brick walls, a giant canvas print of New York City, and an espresso bar. I was sleeping on a stained futon above a noisy taco shop at the time, and when I made a comment about how nice the place was, my mom just said, "Well, he's pursuing his dream, Nathan. That's hard too." I didn't argue. I just smiled, ate my turkey, and went back to grinding. A few months ago, after years of scraping and saving, investing smartly, and catching some lucky breaks with stock options, I made the biggest purchase of my life, a modern penthouse condo smack in the heart of the city. It was everything I had fantasized about during those broke college nights. Clean lines, panoramic views, high ceilings, and best of all, complete silence. No one yelling. No guilt-tripping. No constant noise from upstairs neighbors. Just me, my work, and the sound of the espresso machine humming in the background. I didn't even post it on social media. I wasn't trying to show off. I told maybe 4 people, my best friend, my mentor, and yeah, my family. I wasn't going to hide it. I figured maybe, for once, they'd be proud. My dad's reaction was lukewarm at best. He asked how much I put down, what the interest rate was, and if I had considered buying somewhere less flashy. My mom just stared at the photos I showed her, then said, "Wow, must be nice." And Brandon? He didn't say anything, just scrolled through the pics, set the phone down, and mumbled something about needing to get back to editing. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just surprised. Maybe they didn't know how to express excitement. Maybe they felt left behind. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I got the call. "Nathan," my mom said, her voice weirdly formal, "we'd like to have a family dinner. Just us. Sunday night." I asked if everything was okay. She said it was just a conversation. No big deal. The moment I walked into their house that Sunday, the same house I grew up in, with the same creaky staircase and lemon-scented candles, I felt it. That tension. like I was being summoned, not invited. My parents were already seated at the dining table, both looking unusually serious. Brandon was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We wanted to talk," my dad began, "because there's been some hurt feelings lately." My stomach dropped. My mom folded her hands like she was leading a therapy session. "Nathan, we're happy for you. Really. But we've noticed your brother's been feeling inadequate. Like he can't measure up." Brandon didn't look at me. He stared at the floor. "And," she continued, "we think it might help if you scaled things back a little. At least for now." I blinked. "What does that mean?" My dad cleared his throat. "Well, this penthouse situation. It's a bit much, don't you think? You're only 27. You could get a nice apartment, live reasonably, save more. No need to be flashy. You think I should sell my home?" I asked, making sure I heard him right. "We're not saying that directly," my mom rushed in. "Just consider how it looks. How it makes Brandon feel. He's trying, you know. He's had some rough luck. And then you come in with this palace." Brandon finally spoke, his voice low. "It just feels like you're rubbing it in, man." I stared at them, my heart pounding. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd fallen into some surreal prank show. Like there had to be hidden cameras. "I worked for that place," I said quietly. "I didn't win it in a raffle. I gave up everything for years. And we're not denying that," my mom said, palms raised. "But family is about balance. About keeping each other in check." My dad nodded. "It's about harmony. And right now, the dynamic is off." Something cracked in me then. Not loudly, not all at once, just a small, internal snap. Like a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long. I stood up, calmly, and said, "Thanks for the dinner. I've got work in the morning." I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't argue. I just left, got in my car, drove home to my palace, and sat in silence for an hour staring at the skyline I had spent a decade chasing. I wish I could say that after that family dinner, the one where my parents politely suggested I sell my home because it made my brother feel inadequate, things simmered down. I thought I'd made my boundaries clear. I thought leaving quietly would send a message. But if anything, it made things worse. Like I had insulted some unspoken hierarchy by refusing to shrink myself. And over the next few weeks, the tension escalated in a way I couldn't have predicted. Subtle at first, then not so subtle. It started with the texts. At first, they were harmless enough. My mom forwarding me links to affordable downtown lofts with notes like, "See, this one's more modest, but still cute." Or, "Wouldn't it be nice to have neighbors more your age?" I didn't respond. Then came the guilt-trippy stuff. "Brandon hasn't been sleeping well. He keeps comparing himself to you. It's breaking my heart." Or my personal favorite, "Success means nothing if it tears a family apart." I ignored those too. That's when the others got involved. My aunt called me out of the blue, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She launched into a faux-concerned monologue about how proud everyone was of me. But maybe I should consider how hard it must be for Brandon to constantly live in my shadow. "You've always been the driven one," she said sweetly, like I'd been hoarding ambition unfairly. "Maybe tone it down a bit, for everyone's sake." Tone it down. For everyone's sake. I asked her if she'd be willing to tell Brandon to tone down the freeloading. She didn't like that. After that, my mom tried a different angle. She invited me over for a just us lunch. No dad, no Brandon. I was skeptical, but curious. I showed up to find the dining table already set, pasta boiling on the stove, and my mom in her full apron and smile routine. She chatted about the weather, a new neighbor's dog, random bits of gossip, until finally, she slid a manila folder across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something to consider." Inside were brochures. Therapy centers. Specifically, family counseling services. She sat across from me with that practiced, pitying expression that always meant she thought she was being generous. "I think we all need to heal," she said. "You've been so angry." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "I've been angry. You stormed out of dinner, Nathan. Because you asked me to sell my home to protect Brandon's ego. Because we were trying to help you see the bigger picture." That lunch ended with me leaving mid-bite. After that, the gloves came off. Brandon started showing up to my place uninvited. He'd text me 5 minutes before, or not at all. The first time, he buzzed my unit claiming he was downtown for a shoot and needed to use my place to charge his equipment. I said no. He buzzed again. And again. I ignored him. 20 minutes later, I checked the building camera from my phone. He was still there, pacing in the lobby, visibly irritated. Next day, I got a furious message from my dad. Family means being there for each other, not slamming doors in people's faces. I replied, family also means boundaries. No response. Week after that, Brandon came by again, this time with coffee and donuts like it was some casual drop-in. I met him in the lobby before he could come up. Thought I'd bring breakfast, he said, holding up the bag. I'm working. You're always working. Because that's how I got here. He stared at me, then dropped the bag on the front desk and walked off. Didn't say another word. I didn't eat the donuts. I didn't hear from him for a while after that. Just radio silence from the whole family. I'd be lying if I said it didn't mess with me. I tried to focus on work, long hours, side projects, running teams, but the quiet got loud sometimes. That little voice that whispers, maybe you really are the problem. Maybe you could have handled it differently. Then came the betrayal. It happened on a Saturday morning. I was still in bed, scrolling emails, when I got a ping from my building manager. Hi Nathan, just a quick note. Your brother dropped off the photography prints for the lobby exhibit. We'll be installing them later today. I stared at the message, completely confused. My building often rotated local artwork in the lobby, photos, sculptures, paintings. I'd even recommended a few friends from art school days. But I hadn't submitted anyone recently, and I definitely hadn't signed Brandon up. I replied, sorry, what prints? Manager, Brandon said you cleared it. Said you wanted to support his work and thought the lobby would be perfect. He had access to the elevator already. Seemed legit. I jumped out of bed, threw on sweats, and bolted downstairs. And there they were. 4 massive photography canvases leaned against the lobby wall, ready to be mounted. Stylized black and white portraits, moody, dramatic, very on-brand for Brandon. But what caught me off guard were the captions. In bold, elegant font under each image. Success isn't always earned. Privilege in disguise. Some people climb on the backs of others. Not all penthouses are homes. I froze. My hands started to shake. A few residents were milling around, glancing at the prints, murmuring things I couldn't quite hear. One of them, an older woman from the 14th floor, actually smiled at me. These are powerful, she said. Very raw. Who's the artist? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I went straight to the manager's office and demanded they be removed. He looked bewildered but complied. Brandon didn't respond to my calls. Not that day, not the next. Finally, I drove out to my parents' house. Knocked on the door, heart pounding. My mom opened it like she'd been expecting me. We didn't mean to upset you, she said, before I could speak. You knew? She didn't answer. I pushed past her, into the living room, where Brandon was sitting on the couch, feet up, scrolling on his phone. You forged my name, I said. You accessed my building under false pretenses. It was art, he replied flatly. No, it was a hit job. He finally looked up. His face was stone cold. You've made it clear you don't care about this family. I was just returning the favor. I was speechless. Not because of the words, but the ease with which he said them. Like this had been building in him for years, and now that he'd found a way to hurt me, he'd never felt more alive. You could have asked for help, Brandon. He scoffed. You don't offer help. You flaunt what you have. You think just because you suffered, it gives you the right to look down on everyone else. I don't look down on you, I said. I didn't. But maybe I should have. That was the last thing I said before I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. But something had shifted in me that day, something permanent. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was done. Or at least I thought I was. Because 2 days later, I got a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. From my dad. And what was inside made everything before it look like a warm-up act. If you want to hear what was in that letter, I'll tell you. But brace yourself. It changes everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished a call with my project lead and was debating whether to make lunch or skip straight to my afternoon meetings. I wasn't expecting anything. I rarely got physical mail outside of utility bills or the occasional real estate flyer. But this one stood out. Cream-colored envelope. Heavyweight paper. My name handwritten in my dad's distinct, square lettering. No return address. Something about it made my stomach tighten. I sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, opened the envelope with a butter knife, and unfolded the 2-page letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, steady, but each word felt like a gut punch. Not because it was cruel. I almost wish it had been, but because it was deliberate, cold, calculated. like he had rehearsed every sentence in his head before putting it down, knowing exactly how it would land. He began with something that looked like empathy. "Nathan, I've always admired your discipline. Your ability to shut out distractions and chase your goals. That's not easy. And I'm proud of you, we both are. But there's something more important than achievement. Balance. Family." Then he pivoted. "I've been speaking with your brother. He's going through a hard time. Your recent choices have made things worse. Whether intentional or not, you've created distance between yourself and this family. Your tone, your attitude, your lifestyle, they send a message. One that says, 'I'm better.' That message has hurt your brother deeply, and it's forced your mother and me to reevaluate how we move forward as a family." That's when he dropped the bomb. "As of this week, we've decided to temporarily restructure the family trust." The trust. I didn't even know there was a family trust. My parents weren't wealthy by any means, middle class at best, but I knew my grandfather had owned land upstate that had been passed down when he died. Acres of undeveloped forest, worth more than most people realized. I'd always assumed it was being held for retirement or maybe some future family emergency. My dad never spoke of it in detail. It was one of those "we'll talk about it someday" topics that got buried under small talk and football games. Apparently, someday had arrived, just without me. He continued, "We've named Brandon as the primary beneficiary for the next 5 years. It's not about favoritism. It's about need. We hope you understand that this isn't punishment. It's protection. For the family. If you're willing to meet us halfway, this can change. But if you continue down your current path, you may force our hand long-term. The door is always open, but so is the window of opportunity." I read the letter twice. 3 times. Each time, it made less sense and hurt more. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about being written out, symbolically and literally. My entire life, I had tried to play by the rules. Work hard. Be responsible. Stay humble. I hadn't asked for anything. Not once. And now, the one time something was available, I wasn't just passed over. I was threatened. I sat in my apartment, the city spread out below me, and felt completely, utterly hollow. Over the next few weeks, I spiraled. Not dramatically. Not in the way people imagine when they think rock bottom. I still woke up, logged into work, answered emails, attended meetings. But I was checked out. My focus evaporated. Deadlines crept up faster than usual. I stopped working out, stopped cooking, started ordering takeout every night. I left dishes in the sink. I missed a friend's birthday dinner and forgot to call back another who left a voicemail saying he was worried about me. I ghosted my mentor. I didn't even realize how far I'd slipped until my manager pulled me aside during a Zoom call. "Nathan," she said gently, "this isn't like you." I wanted to lie, to say I was fine. But instead, I just said, "I know." She gave me some time off. A week. No questions asked. I thought about using it to take a trip, escape somewhere, reset. But the truth was, I didn't have the energy. So I stayed home, slept in, binge-watched old sci-fi shows, and stared at my phone more than I care to admit. One night, around 2 a.m., I was scrolling through an old photo album on my phone. Pictures from college, mostly grainy shots of my first apartment, screenshots of early code projects, selfies with friends I barely spoke to now. And then I found a video I didn't remember taking. It was me, age 21, sitting on the roof of my college dorm. I was talking to the camera, half joking, half serious. If future me ever sees this, congrats. You made it. I hope you've got a real coffee machine and not this instant junk. But seriously, don't forget what it felt like to want it this bad. To work this hard. You owe that kid something. I watched it twice. Then again. I don't know why, but something about that version of me, hungry, tired, hopeful, hit harder than anything my parents had said. I didn't recognize him completely, but I remembered the feeling. The fire. I stayed up all night after that. Not crying. Not plotting revenge. Just thinking. Next morning, I woke up and cleaned my entire apartment. Top to bottom. Threw out every piece of takeout trash. Washed the dishes. Did laundry. Made my bed like I hadn't in weeks. Then I sat down at my desk, opened a blank doc, and started writing something I hadn't written in years, a product concept. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just for me. It was an idea I'd had ages ago. A tool for freelancers to track income, expenses, and contracts in one clean dashboard. I had shelved it during my early days at the company, thinking I didn't have time. But now, I needed something that felt like mine again. Something that reminded me who I was before I let their voices get in my head. I built a prototype in 2 weeks. Nothing fancy, just a bare-bones interface and some back-end logic. But it worked. And more importantly, it gave me purpose. I didn't tell anyone. I kept working on it in the evenings, slowly rebuilding my schedule. I got back to journaling, meal prepping, working out. Started attending team meetings with real input again. My manager noticed. So did a few coworkers. They started sending me bigger tasks again, harder problems. I crushed them. Quietly. Steadily. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing approval. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just living. A month passed. Then 2. I stopped checking in on Brandon's socials. I muted the family group chat. I told myself I'd re-engage when I was ready. When I wanted to. And not a second before. One day, I came home to a note taped to my door. Can we talk? B. No envelope. No text. Just 3 words. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to tear it up. Burn it. But I didn't. I took it inside, placed it on the counter, and left it there. I didn't call him. Instead, I kept building. The tool I had started, now called Ledgerlight, had grown. I'd onboard a few freelancer friends as beta testers. Feedback was promising. One even offered to invest. I turned it down. I wasn't ready for that yet. But it lit a fuse. I started planning a soft launch. Bought a domain. Hired a designer to clean up the UI. Built a waitlist landing page. And one morning, as I was reviewing metrics, I realized something. I hadn't thought about the trust. The betrayal. The letter. In weeks. Not because I had healed, but because I had shifted the focus. They hadn't won. They had tried to knock me off center. And for a while, they did. But I found something they never expected me to find. Myself. The version of me that wasn't defined by their approval or guilt. The version that didn't need validation from parents who only loved me conditionally, or a brother who resented my existence. That version, he was just getting started. But then, just when I thought I had finally built enough distance, something happened that pulled me back into the fire. A voicemail. From my mom. Tearful. Breathy. Rambling. I didn't know they were going to do this, Nathan. I swear, please call me. It's gone too far. Your brother, your father. I can't fix this alone. That's when I knew. Something had changed. Something big. And this time, I wasn't going to walk away. I was going to respond, but on my terms. I didn't call her back right away. That might sound cruel, especially after a voicemail that emotional. But you have to understand, my mother is a master of tone. She knows exactly when to use warmth and when to play the victim. I grew up watching her wield it like a scalpel. Soft voice, quivering breath, dramatic pauses. Always stopping just short of actually saying anything direct. Always forcing you to connect the dots, feel the guilt, fill in the blanks. She never left messages like that. And she especially never admitted she couldn't fix something. That was the first clue that whatever happened, it wasn't just a spat or another round of think of your brother. This was deeper, more volatile. But I wasn't about to walk into another emotional ambush. Not this time. I had worked too hard to reclaim my peace, to remember who I was without the noise. So I did something I never would have done 6 months ago. I didn't react. I strategized. First, I saved the voicemail. Downloaded a copy. I didn't even know if I'd need it, but my gut said this was going to get complicated. Then I sent a quick message to someone I hadn't spoken to in a long while. Hey, can I buy you coffee this week? I need to talk. Family stuff. That someone was Jamie, a childhood friend of mine who'd grown up a few blocks over. We lost touch after high school, reconnected briefly in college, then drifted again. But Jamie knew my family, had seen the dynamics, heard the arguments. Been there the night my dad made Brandon lie about breaking the garage door, then punished me when I tried to correct the story. Jamie had always called it like it was. 2 days later, we met at this little cafe off 6th Street. Low lighting, good pastries, quiet jazz in the background. I didn't even sit down before she gave me a look and said, "Okay, what happened now?" I told her everything. From the penthouse guilt tripping to the fake art exhibit, the trust betrayal, the fallout, and finally, the voicemail. She listened the whole way through without interrupting. Sipped her coffee, eyes sharp. At one point, she muttered, "Unreal," under her breath. When I finally finished, she leaned forward and said, "They're bleeding you, Nate. Just emotionally instead of financially." I know. No, I don't think you do. This isn't about the money or the apartment. It's about control. You're the only one who ever broke out of their little orbit, and now they're trying to drag you back. I stared down at my cup. So what do I do? Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a challenge. You stop defending and start playing offense. I blinked. What does that even look like? Jamie tapped her finger on the table. You said there's a trust. You were written out. Brandon was made sole beneficiary temporarily. For 5 years. Does it have to be 5 years? I frowned. My dad made it sound like the decision was final. Jamie raised an eyebrow. Doesn't mean it's legal. That's when the first piece of the plan came into focus. I didn't know the specifics of the trust, when it was set up, how it was structured, what rights I had. But if there was a document, there were laws around how it could be changed. Especially if it was my grandfather's land. That made it generational. Possibly irrevocable. So I made another call. This time, to an attorney. Not just any attorney. A former mentor of mine who had transitioned from software law to estate litigation a few years back. I didn't have to tell him much. Just enough for him to agree to review any documents I could get. You're not filing anything yet, he warned. We're just gathering information. Be smart. Smart. That meant not storming into my parents' house demanding answers. It meant baiting them, gently. So I sent a message to my dad. Short. Calm. Almost passive. Hey, got mom's voicemail. Hope everything's okay. Want to catch up this weekend? Maybe clear the air. He replied in under 5 minutes. Glad to hear from you. Sunday afternoon work. Perfect. It felt too easy, which made me even more cautious. When I arrived that Sunday, my mom looked pale. Nervous. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could stop her. Thank you for coming, she whispered. My dad was seated in the den, legs crossed, expression unreadable. Brandon wasn't there. That alone told me something was wrong. He was always at the center of these little dramas. We made small talk. Tea. Snacks. Weather. Then I asked, casually, so, what's going on? They exchanged a glance. My dad cleared his throat. Your brother's going through a rough patch. I waited. He took out a business loan last year, he continued, to expand the studio. Bought equipment, leased a second location. That was news to me. He fell behind on payments. Missed deadlines. Some legal stuff is happening now. What kind of legal stuff? My mom winced. He defaulted. The lender's threatening asset seizure. I sat back. And this affects me how? More glances. My dad finally said it. He used part of the trust as collateral. My stomach dropped. I blinked. He what? My mom stepped in. It wasn't the main land parcel, just a sliver. A few acres. He thought he could flip the profit quickly. Which part? I asked sharply. The East Ridge, my dad muttered. That was the most developable portion. The one with road access. I didn't even know he had access to do that, I said. He shouldn't have, my mom said quickly. But your father, we thought it would help him get stable. Let me guess, I said, leaning forward. The paperwork wasn't clean. Now the whole trust is being reviewed. Neither of them spoke. I stood up, walked to the window, took a breath. Then I turned. I want to see the documents. All of them. Original trust. Addendums. Transfers. My dad stiffened. That's private. Not if it affects my legal inheritance. Not if Brandon's actions are jeopardizing it. You can either let me review it with a lawyer, or I subpoena it. Your choice. It was the first time I'd ever seen my father truly angry. Not yelling, not slamming fists, but that low, simmering fury that came from someone used to holding power and suddenly realizing they didn't have it anymore. You've changed, he said coldly. No, I replied. I've just stopped apologizing. I left with no hug, no goodbye, no snacks wrapped in foil like old times. 3 days later, my lawyer had scanned copies of the trust and all its modifications. And sure enough, my name had been quietly removed through a document that, according to him, wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. The trust had been set up by my grandfather with a specific clause. No alterations can be made unless all named beneficiaries agree in writing. I never signed anything. My signature was nowhere to be found, which meant the 5-year restructure was not only illegitimate, it was grounds for a full reversal, possibly even legal action. Jamie was the first person I told. We met again at the cafe, and when I laid out the facts, her grin grew with every detail. So what now, she asked. I exhaled slowly. Now, I said, we stop playing defense. I gave them one more chance. Not out of mercy, but out of strategy. After reviewing the documents, my lawyer and I crafted a simple, polite letter addressed to both of my parents. It outlined, without emotion or judgment, the legal inconsistencies in the amended trust. It cited the original clause from my grandfather that prevented unilateral changes. It highlighted the absence of my signature. It closed with a clear, non-confrontational request. We respectfully ask for the immediate reversal of the unauthorized modifications, including the removal of Nathan Carter as a beneficiary. If not resolved by date, we will proceed through the appropriate legal channels. The deadline was 2 weeks out. I didn't hear anything for 13 days. No texts, no calls, no knocks on my door. Just silence, like the kind that settles in right before a storm. On the 14th day, I received an email. It was from my dad. No greeting, no apology, just a PDF. The trust has been amended and restored to its original form. Brandon's authority has been revoked. You're reinstated. Consider this matter closed. I showed the email to my lawyer. He smiled. It's done. You win. But that wasn't the revenge. That was just the warning shot. Because here's the thing. They thought the issue was over because the paperwork was fixed. What they didn't realize was how much damage they'd already done. Not to my finances, but to my name, my trust, my reputation. Remember the photography exhibit Brandon tried to install in my building lobby? The one where he snuck in my building and displayed slanderous captions like "privilege in disguise" and "not all penthouses are homes." Yeah, I hadn't forgotten either. And now that the legal threat had passed, I had the bandwidth and the motivation to make sure Brandon learned a lesson of his own. I started small. A DM to a gallery manager I knew through a mutual friend, someone Brandon had been trying to woo for months. I sent her the lobby photos Brandon had tried to install in my building, along with a short message. Thought you should see the kind of work he tries to push without consent. She replied 2 hours later. Thanks. That crosses a line. We won't be moving forward with him. Then I moved to his lease. Remember the second studio space he leased for expansion? Through some online research and a LinkedIn post he'd made months earlier, I figured out the building. I didn't contact the landlord directly. I didn't need to. I contacted a friend who worked for a commercial real estate firm in the area. I gave him Brandon's business name and asked if the owner had ever made late payments or tried to sublet. My friend laughed. Yeah, that guy's a mess. Hasn't paid for 2 months. Wants to renegotiate the lease, but won't return paperwork. I didn't say anything incriminating. I didn't push. But the conversation made its way back to the landlord. 2 weeks later, Brandon lost the space. Strike 2. Finally, I went after his real currency, his image. Brandon had built a modest social media following as a visionary creative, 12K followers on Instagram, a curated aesthetic, inspirational quotes, carefully filtered behind-the-scenes reels. I created a fake account, followed his page, and waited. Soon, he posted a new series called The Art of the Climb, with captions about overcoming adversity, building his business without handouts, and chasing success without compromising values. I screenshotted the post. Then I uploaded a side-by-side comparison. The post versus a scan of the letter my dad had sent me months earlier, the one where he admitted Brandon used the trust as collateral for his business loan. I didn't include identifying information. No address. No docs. Just a caption. Curious definition of without handouts. Then I let the internet do its thing. Within 24 hours, Brandon locked his account. Strike 3. The fallout was quick. I didn't hear from him again. No apology. No attempt to reconcile. Just silence. His name disappeared from my building's directory. Apparently, he had been living in a friend's apartment nearby. Gone now. My parents, on the other hand, tried one last maneuver. An invitation. Dinner. At their house. To talk. I considered ignoring it. But I needed closure. So I went. It was just the two of them. Brandon wasn't there. The dining room was pristine. Napkins folded. China I hadn't seen since Christmas 5 years ago. My mom served roast beef. My dad poured wine. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Until my mom set down her fork and said, "We just want to move forward." I nodded. So do I. My dad cleared his throat. We've made mistakes. I didn't speak. We let things spiral, he continued. We thought we were helping Brandon, but we see now how that hurt you. I finally met his eyes. Do you? He hesitated. We're trying. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Because here's how we move forward. They both straightened. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for affection. I'm not even asking for a relationship. What I am asking for is distance. My mom's eyes welled up. Nathan, I held up a hand. I've rebuilt everything you tried to strip away. I've cleaned up the mess Brandon left behind. And I've done it without rage. Without dragging your names through the mud. Because I still have more respect for this family than you ever had for me. They sat frozen. I stood. I'll see you on holidays. Maybe. But I'm done playing the scapegoat. I'm done being the emotional punching bag. From now on, you get access to me based on how you treat me. Not because of blood. My mom wiped her eyes. My dad just stared at his plate. I walked out. No hug. No wave. No thank you for coming. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. Quiet. Clean. Final. That was 6 months ago. Since then, my life has been simple. Work is steady. Ledgerlight launched with 3,000 signups in the first month. I hired a small team. Quiet growth, no flash. Just results. The penthouse. Still mine. I upgraded the coffee machine. My parents haven't called. Brandon's social media remains inactive. Word is, he moved out of state. Sometimes people ask me if I regret any of it. If it was too much. If I wish I had just let it go. But here's the truth. I didn't burn the bridge. They did. I just made sure they couldn't rebuild it with stolen wood. And that, my friend, is how I got my peace back. For good.